Excellent. Everyone can hear me? Just raise your hand. Let me know if you can hear me. Pardon me?
Louder, he says.
Louder. A little bit louder. Please. Okay, we'll try to have that adjusted. In the meantime, thank you for coming out on this gorgeous October day. It's hard to believe that fall is here and that we're ready for another season of Café Scientifique. My name is Donna Francis, and I work at the Ontario Science Centre organizing these Café Scientifique events. So this is our first one for our season. And I'm really glad that you could come out and make it. Just a quick show of hands. How many people here have never been to a cafe before? Is there anyone here first time ever? Okay, well, welcome. Thank you for coming out. Just wanted to welcome you to the cafe and let you know a little bit about how this works. So we have several talented experts who are here to address this topic of information inundation. Is digital technology really helping us to stay informed? And each one of our talented experts is going to speak very briefly for about 8 minutes or so on their own perspective of that topic. So they're going to bring their expertise and their perspective to this topic. They'll go one after the other, and then after we're all done, we're going to have a quick little 15-minute break. It's a great chance to grab something to drink and something to eat, and then we'll engage in the discussion, and that's when you can get those questions out for yourselves, for each other, or for any of our experts. So, without further ado, I guess we should get started. So, first up is going to be Kate Taylor. I'll just give the mic to her.
Hi, I'm very honored to be here because this is a Café Scientifique and I'm not Scientifique anymore, so I'm about to speak. I'm a cultural critic. I, for years, have written about the arts for the Globe and Mail. I'm also, in my other life, I'm a novelist and have published 2 novels. Sorry, can you hear? No? Yes? Okay. I specialize in writing about culture, and I spent the last year on an Atkinson Fellowship researching Canadian cultural sovereignty in the digital age, and that rather long title is a way of looking at what is going to happen to our cultural industries as we move into a world in which there are very few boundaries to culture and information. And Canada historically has maintained Canadian culture both through subsidy and through regulation. And those regulations specifically are going to run into problems when they encounter an internet world that doesn't really know geographic boundaries. So that was sort of my area of research. And I spent an entire wonderful year doing that. And then the results were compiled as a series of articles that were published in the Toronto Star about 3 weeks ago now, I guess, at the end of September. And looking at all kinds of areas of the cultural industries. And the final article in the series was about the future and what we were going to do in the future. And it looked a bit at regulation and a bit about the issue of whether or not we can regulate the internet. And as a kind of sidebar to that piece about the future, I interviewed 5 young people about what technology they owned and how they used it. And I'd love to say that these 5 young people were selected randomly, but they weren't at all. They were friends of friends and relatives of friends, and one was my cousin's daughter. And that was not a very scientific way, obviously, of selecting them. So they were all kids who were just finishing high school and were about to go to university, or in one instance, one of them was headed for CEGEP in Montreal. And they all had lots and lots of technology and lived in households in which there was lots of technology. And they all used this technology to access lots and lots of media and content. They had very little interest in or knowledge of Canadian content, which is one of my areas of research. They really made very little distinction between Canadian and I guess what you might call international content, but was really, of course, in most cases, American content. But of these interviews, the one I found the most shocking was one with a young woman who we chose not to name in the Toronto Star, and I think you'll understand when I explain what she said to me, why we chose not to name her. I interviewed this young woman because her aunt had said to me, talk to the kids. The kids could get anything. And so this conversation started because his friend, an old friend of mine, who also worked as a cultural critic and a movie critic, a music critic, she was talking to me about Avatar. She was giving me her critical opinion of Avatar, which she was dismissing, and giving me a great leg. And she said, yeah, I watched it with the kids the other night, which she means her nieces and nephews. And then a few days later, she phoned me back and she said, I didn't want to leave you with the impression we had gone and paid money to see Avatar. And I said, oh no? How did you see Avatar? Avatar was still in the cinemas at this point. And she said, the kids can get anything. So I talked to the kid who could get anything. And I had BitTorrenting explained to me, so I was really dumb. I'd never heard of it. So it's called BitTorrenting, and here's how you do it. But I was interested because I wanted to know the quality, because I thought, well, if you're BitTorrenting pirated files, aren't they of really appalling quality? And I had explained, well, yeah, usually once the movie's been out for a few weeks, some critic somewhere will release a review copy, or someone in the media will release a review copy online, and you'll be able to BitTorrent actually a fairly high quality copy. So this young woman explained this to me, and then she told me that she has 7,000 songs on her iPod, none of which she has paid for, including the entire discography of The Doors, and Led Zeppelin, and a couple of other classic rock bands. She's into classic rock. And then beyond that, she started to tell me that she also downloads brand name computer programs without paying, such as Photoshop or Microsoft Office. And at that point, I guess I said something. I tried always in these interviews never to make any indication that I was judging this behavior in any way, because I wanted the kids to tell me, what they had and what they used. And but at that point, I guess I asked something or said something, and she said to me, well, those programs are really expensive. And I thought about that answer, which really intrigued me, because at the beginning of this interview, when I'd asked her what technology she had, she explained she lived in a household in which there were 5 television sets. So this family can afford 5 television sets, but it can't afford a copy of Photoshop. And I think that's sort of the nub of the issue for me as a cultural critic, is it's about what we value, right? And we seem to value the technology and the gadgets a lot, and of course the technology and the gadgets keep coming down in price, but we don't seem to value the content that much, and we seem to think that all the content should be free. And ideally what the internet will deliver to us is a world in which we have swept away the gatekeepers, the pesky editors and producers and studios who have stood in the way of our choices and insisted on narrowing them to the few things that can make a lot of money. And we'll sweep them away, and we will have ultimate diversity and ultimate choice. Unfortunately, I don't really think that's what's happening. What I suspect is happening is we're getting a very polarized situation, where on the one hand we have a huge amount of amateur content, which is not to say that it isn't good content, but it is amateur. People are not making a living producing it. And we may, as a next layer of that, I suspect, be moving to a point where we get a lot of first-time professional content. First novels are becoming a bigger thing. And I think part of that is because everyone's willing to take one chance at the roulette wheel, thinking they're going to be the next, J.K. Rowling or Stephen King. And once they've done it once and found out there's no money in it, they may not be able to afford to produce a second novel or a third novel. So we may get those sort of first-time professionals and the amateur content, and then at the far other extreme, we will get the huge studios, the massive brands that can afford to weather the digital revolution and the cult of free that the internet has brought with it, and can manage, because they make so much money and they sell so many units, they can manage still to make money even if people are pirating Avatar, and despite the fact people are pirating Avatar, James Cameron is a billionaire. So we get that sort of polarized situation, and that's something that should worry us as Canadians, because our culture is right smack in the middle there. That we're not the giant studios. The things that creators in Canada create tend to be in the middle. So that was one of the issues I looked at a lot over this past year. And there are various things we could talk about and think about that are potentially positive developments, and they're very varied. One thing I just started to research, and I don't really know that much about it yet, but is the notion of micropayments. Micropayments, that is being able to pay amounts less than $1 for something, is an area that's really sort of been abandoned by industry as not functional, but there are a few companies that are starting to do some work in that area. There are a lot of business models, such as newspapers, that could function a lot better if people could figure out methods of micropayments that work better. So that's one area I've been starting to pursue a little bit. Another conclusion I came to very strongly was that public broadcasting is a very important area, because one of the things about public broadcasting is it fits very nicely with the sort of internet philosophy of give and take. Because it's also, obviously, it has to have a budget and it has to be able to pay for itself, it doesn't have to have a philosophy of profit, and that fits well with the internet. So public broadcasting has an interesting role, I think, in the future of the internet. One thing that happened in the UK, where of course there's a very strong tradition of public broadcasting, when they were discussing these issues, was they started to look at the notion that they shouldn't just have the BBC, their public broadcasting, but they should have a public publisher, because they saw that as a more internet-friendly model. So that was one idea they were kicking around. Another, I'm sorry, I have a list somewhere. What were the other ones I was thinking of? Another thing is about copyright. I think copyright often gets a bad rap in the user community and is seen as a sort of tool of huge corporations to kind of lock down content. But the reality for someone like myself who owns a few copyrights and makes a small amount of money from them is that if we don't have copyright, that is, if we don't have a system of remunerating creators for their creation, ultimately creators will stop creating. And that was, I think, one of the largest concerns I had in this research project, was that I saw a situation where, consumers can, of course, very easily vote with their mouse and vote with their dollars or their pennies, and thereby sweep away, actually, huge areas of content that are of great value and are of great interest to many people, but don't happen to fit in an internet business model. So part of, I guess, what I was looking at were both public models, regulatory models, and also private business models that could encourage content to thrive. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody, my name is Nadia Kady. I'm a faculty member. I'm a professor at the Faculty of Information. And I think it would take me more than 8 minutes just to explain what the Faculty of Information is. Everybody always asks me, what is it that you do? So I'll spare you the details for now, but it used to be the Faculty of Library and Information Science. We used to train librarians and archivists and museum curators. And now we hire people who have nothing to do with librarianship. We hire cognitive scientists and organizational management people and computer scientists and psychologists. So I think our field has really broadened. But at the same time, I find that information overload is really a reality for me in my daily work when I have to deal with students for whom, that staying during class is normal behavior, having all kinds of gadgets and expecting from the faculty to be able to post our lectures online, to be communicating with them all the time, 24/7 through email, is just a normal way of life. So I think it's been really interesting because we studied the social aspects of information and technology, and at the same time we really live them in our daily lives. So it's been very interesting to me. I started, as we always do, by Googling information overload for this session. And it's interesting what you get. And by the way, I think it's well known now that most people, when they do a Google search, they usually don't browse, they don't scroll down more than 2 or 3 screens worth of results. So if you're not among the top 2 or 3 screens, doesn't even matter. You're not informational. You're not relevant. You're not even there. So already what counts as information to me is quite biased, but by the hits and where you are positioned in that list. But interestingly, when you search for information overload, the first hit is Wikipedia. You cannot get away from Wikipedia. It's everywhere. It used to be the faculty member's worst nightmare. And it's no longer true. I think we now understand and accept the fact that students do go on Wikipedia, they use it, and there's some value to it. So, but what's interesting is when you kind of scroll down after Wikipedia entries, what you get is a lot of focus on business or organizational issues around information overload. And often the definition is around information overload as an extent